welcome to another episode of Half Court Press. He's Wilson Moore. I'm Jon Walker. It's been a while, to say the
It has
least.
been.
It has been a while. So we're gonna delve into some things that have transpired over the last, what, I think, month since we last
Yeah.
talked.
I think Dylan was just telling
Um,
us a month and 3 days.
yeah, man, which is just, it doesn't feel that long at all.
No, it
I
doesn't.
would have said, like, yeah, 3 weeks max, like absolute max. Um, but yeah, let's start there. Wilson, how are you? And what have you been up to, man?
I'm doing pretty well, keeping up with Nebraska off-season stuff. 2 nights ago, I ran face first into a chain link fence in a slow pitch softball game. Uh, those are kind of the main things,
Yeah,
honestly.
yeah. You and Andrew Wigley, you guys went 0 for 5. What happened?
Yeah, I mean,
I looked at the
look,
box score. I said, my two guys. What is going
I,
on?
I'm not one for making excuses, but I will say I am mired in some bad luck recently. Like I am squaring balls up, I am hitting line drives, and
Right, two
they're
people.
just fine. They're just finding gloves. I'm just, I think my expected batting average, I think my exit velo are all pretty good. And Wegley, same thing. Wegley hit a rocket the other night, just right to the third baseman. It
So he
looked ticketed
said,
down the line for extra bases off the bat. He squared it up pretty well. So yeah, we're just, I think we're getting some batting average, this bad batting average on balls in play luck. It's been pretty rough.
yeah, no, that's tough. That's tough. Yeah, man, it's been I haven't really, it's kind of been most of the same, just trying to keep up with the offseason news. Um, Obviously there are a couple of Creighton players that are prospective NBA players. And so, that's kind of kept me somewhat busy with an eye on the program. And yeah, I think we're gonna have maybe maybe a rarity, a Creighton packed episode today.
Yeah.
Just because they've had a few more things happen over the last month and 3 days than Nebraska has. Let's start there. Trey Alexander, we've said it on here for months. It was long the expectation that he was going to, one, declare for the NBA draft and go through the pre-draft process, but two, ultimately stay in. And I had just, there was some buzz about him maybe withdrawing, and I reached out, the day before the deadline, and was told, that was all fan talk, essentially. Like any semblance of him coming back was all fan talk, is what I was told. But now the deadline's passed and it is official. Trey Alexander is foregoing his final year of college eligibility to remain in the NBA draft. You've seen him play. What are your early impressions, early thoughts on Trey Alexander trying to make the jump to the next level at this stage of his career?
I think this was always the option that made the most sense
Yeah.
for a variety of reasons. One being this is not a great draft class. I don't think it's as deep or as talented, frankly, as some of the previous years, or maybe even next year. I'm not sure about next year, but I think it makes sense for a guy like Trey Alexander, who's a little more on the fringe. Someone who, if he does get drafted, is probably a second rounder. I think
Yeah.
this year gives him a much better chance at that. And I think there's also a certain element of like after you've done so much in college, at a certain point, you've just kind of put everything you can on film. Like
Yeah.
I don't know what Trey Alexander could have done if he went back to Creighton that would significantly improve his draft stock,
Yeah.
that scouts could see in that extra year that would jump him up draft boards, especially considering, if he comes back and goes into the draft a year later, he's a year older at that point. And that
Yeah.
matters to NBA
Yeah.
front offices. What is he's 22, right?
22, I believe.
22. Yeah, you come back and you go into the draft and you're 23. Like you are ancient by draft standards, and I think,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's a thing. And it's only a year, but that is a thing scouts and GMs and front offices
Sure.
look at. And I don't think, I don't know, Trey Alexander would have had to improve a lot in one season to kind of counteract that just natural aging process that is important to front offices.
Yeah. my cat agrees, and I agree that I'm not a big believer, maybe to some degree, like there's a difference in a 19-year-old prospect against a 23-year-old prospect, and I fully get that. I fully understand it. Um, but is there a difference between 22 and 3 months and 23 and a half? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
not really in the grand scheme of things. Like, if a dude's gonna help your team for 10 years, what does it matter if it's from his ages 27 to 37 or 21 to 31? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's
So
a good point.
that's kind of like where I fall on it. Develop, like I said, we're talking about if you take a 19-year-old kid to a 23-year-old kid, it's different. That is, I get it. Like 22 to 23, it's like, oh man, we can't take
Good
him
point.
because he was born 8 months too late. It's like, what are we talking about? And all that to say, we've seen a little bit of that with Baylor Shireman, who is talented, obviously. Showed out at the combine in Chicago. In the biggest knock right now, other than, I think that the we're talking ball, the biggest thing has been, hey, we'd like to see him move his feet a little bit more on defensively. Um, yeah, but then people are like, hey, he could slide into the first round. But he's 23. And it's like, are you serious? What does it matter? Like, are you serious? Um, but yeah, man, pretty monumental for Creighton's offseason. Again, that was long the expectation that Trey Alexander was going to declare and eventually stay in. When I talked to Greg McDermott, 5 weeks ago now, about a month ago now, about the roster for next year. I asked him what they do with the final scholarship, and he said, we're still going to keep hosting visits and stuff. And I was like, do you hold that, kind of with the possible thought that, hey, here in, like I said, this was a month ago. The deadline was May 29th. I said, hey, here in, a month, Trey Alexander could say, hey, I'm withdrawing from the draft. And he was like, no, like we're still hosting visits and stuff. And if that were to happen, then, we deal with it. And so it was never like, yeah, we're holding on to that last spot for Trey Alexander. But yeah, I mean, the picture is just a lot more clearer now. There are absolutes, there are certainties, and that's certainly one of them. Talking about rosters, Nebraska is the latest to make an addition, and I think now, Wilson, the Huskers only have one scholarship left.
That's right. Yeah.
We've come a
A quick
long way
thing.
in 6 weeks, man.
Yeah. A quick thing. Just Dylan informs us Trey turned 21 on May 2nd, so he's a little
Okay, I
younger than we were
yeah, I
giving
knew
him
he had a
credit for there.
birthday. I knew he had a birthday in the middle of May, but I thought he had turned 22.
Yeah. Yeah. But anyway, yes. Yeah. Nebraska added what I think will be the final piece of the offseason. I know it's pretty common for teams to keep a scholarship open, and that's what Nebraska did last year up until Aaron Eulis got suspended for
Yeah,
the gambling fallout in Iowa. That was when they added Boogie Coleman. So I think this is probably it for Nebraska's off-season moves, barring some sort of unforeseen circumstance like last season.
yeah.
And that comes in the form of Berke Bayukdengel. I believe I pronounced that right. I saw
Have fun
the
with that one.
yeah. Oh yeah. It's easier to spell than I
Okay,
realized. Like
okay.
when I first saw it like printed out, I'm like, oh, it's gonna take me a little bit to memorize that spelling. But
Yeah,
it's not hard. It's once you write it out a couple times, it's pretty easy. But yeah, he's an interesting piece in that like I don't know exactly where he fits in right now, but there's a lot of things he can do, like in
yeah,
theory. He didn't like shoot the ball great at UCLA last year. He's a sophomore. He's only spent 1 year in college. He wasn't a great shooter, wasn't a great rebounder at UCLA, but his best performances have come internationally, come playing for Team Turkey. That's when he's really shown out and really shown like what he can do. He was named to some all tournament team in one of international play like last summer, the summer before that, and he has all the tools of someone who can be really good and contribute a lot um, in Big Ten play. The shooting's there, the size is there. He hasn't put it all together yet, but there's a lot of potential there. He's someone that you could easily see, you watch clips of him, you uh, look at, the things he can do, you can see him being a real contributor at some point. He wasn't quite there at UCLA. He didn't play
Yeah.
every game. I forget if he dealt with some injuries or not, but he wasn't all the way there at UCLA. He's got 3 years of eligibility. I could definitely see him becoming a major piece at some point. We'll see if it's this upcoming year, but I know the Nebraska really likes his potential and his tools and what he could look like when he puts it all together.
Yeah. When you kind of say, he's at some point going to contribute, I don't really think that's a question. You go get a guy with 3 years left saying, hey, like, we want to develop him. Josiah Alec, gone. Rink Mast, out for season. They bring in Andrew Morgan, but it's still a front court that has some questions, right? All things considered. Do you think there's a chance that he has a significant, I don't want to say significant as in like leading scorer, but like, is there a chance that he has a significant role as early as this season?
Absolutely, yeah. I think I mean I certainly think he'll get minutes in some way or another. Just they need someone who can play the power forward, and they've got a little versatility there. Jawan Gary was the starting four for
Yeah.
a lot of last year. He moved to the three when they went to a bigger lineup with Josiah Alec in and Bryce Williams moving to the point guard. But I think Gel might be the most like pure four on the team. I think that's his natural spot. That's where he's most comfortable. So I think, yeah, I definitely think he'll get minutes. We'll see what he can do, how much he contributes. Nebraska has some options there. You can play, I think, Andrew Morgan at the four. I think he shot like in the like 30 something percent on a admittedly low volume threes last year. So I think he can space the floor enough. If you put him at the four and Braxton Mia at the five. I
Yeah.
mentioned Gary. Maybe even if they want to get real crazy, go some like Gavin Griffiths, like stretch four small ball. So yeah, we'll see where that that goes. You saw it last year where it took a little bit to kind of establish the rotation that
Yeah.
went from like December, January into the end of the season. We'll certainly see more guys get playing time early, and at some point, one or two are going to be the odd men out there. But yeah, to get back to your original question, I think it's very reasonable to expect Berke to come in and uh, get minutes off the bat.
Yeah. It seems almost like kind of the versatility that I have believed Creighton will have. Maybe problems isn't the right word, but will have problems figuring out in the middle of their lineup because Creighton can do a lot with 2-3-4 next year. Can do a lot with 2-3-4. And it sounds like for Nebraska, that's 3-4-5.
Yeah,
It just seems like what you're gonna have. You have a guy like Bryce Williams, right? Like you know what you're gonna have in him. But what do you have there exactly? 3-4-5. Is it a small ball lineup? Do we have to go big to play whatever 7-footer Purdue has? Like what
there's
does
a new
that
one.
look like? What does that look like? But that'll be the fun of it. That's obviously why you schedule non-con the way most teams do. You'll take a couple of good tests, a couple of really good tests. And then you undoubtedly have a few games that help you get acclimated to the season and help you figure out some of those rotation experiments, if you will.
Yeah,
So yeah, I mean, Creighton's going to deal with it. Nebraska's going to deal with it. It might look a little different, but it's going to happen, obviously. Um, I
I
think
do
that
think
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and been thinking about this quite a bit in the last 24 hours because I'm writing about it today. I think Nebraska will have a little more versatility than it did a season ago.
I think so.
Um, we saw when they played a bigger, stronger team, especially I think the last two games of the season, Illinois in the Big Ten tournament, and then Texas A&M in the NCAA tournament. Those teams were just bigger and stronger and more athletic, and they got to every rebound, and there
Yeah.
just wasn't a lot Nebraska could do about it. I think they have a little more. They have more options of okay, do we want to go big? Do we want to sacrifice some shooting, some skill? To be able to kind of bang down low a little bit more because they're three best rebounders, four best rebounders really with Rink Mass, Josiah Alec, Jawan Gary, and Bryce Williams. We're all in the starting lineup. If they're getting pushed around, there are no reinforcements. You got to just grit your teeth and get
Yeah.
through it at that point. Next season, they'll have Braxton Mia, who played like 16 minutes a game for Washington last year, and he's a guy who can come in and be a big body and push people around and be 7-1 and a big 7-1, a
Yeah.
sturdy 7-1. So I think that gives them a little more options of if they want a more skilled lineup, more big lineup, but more a little more defensive focus. I think they have a few more options than they did a season ago.
Yeah. No, I think so too. I think the same will apply to Creighton. Um, I know they lost a few pieces in the portal. They were always going to have to lose one, I believe, because they were bringing in three freshmen and only graduated Baylor Shireman and Francisco Farabello. So, and then the Trey Alexander scholarship. I'm sorry. So, they really only had to fill two spots on the roster. They did that with Pop Isaacs and Jemiah Neal. But I think top to bottom, yeah, Creighton, as I mentioned 10 minutes ago, they're going to be able to do a lot lineup wise. Like, where do the three freshmen come in? How quickly do they develop? Um, how much of an impact are Pop Isaacs and Jemiah Neal going to have right away? I'm assuming Pop is going to, immediately be the starting two guard right next to Stephen Ashworth, and as he should be. That's why he was brought in. He was regarded as one of the best guards in the portal, and that's what Creighton lost in Trey Alexander. So yeah, go bring in Pop Isaacs. Let him, let the kids play early, as they say. So yeah, I think it'll be two kind of new look teams next year. Maybe the same identities, sure. Creighton's still gonna shoot 23s a game. Nebraska is still going to have to weather through those athletic, those physical, those like hands-on teams that you run into every night in the Big Ten. But it's going to look different, no doubt, no doubt. So
No,
yeah,
with
yeah,
it seems to me, and the way you're saying this, and particularly regarding Creighton's freshmen, like is Jackson McAndrew like the perfect guy for this system? Like it seems to me, if you're Creighton, your best case scenario, if you play out the season, where everything goes right, is he comes in and is just a dude right away and does his best Baylor Shireman
yeah,
impression.
yeah. And see, that's kind of where the interesting thing is, because I talked to Jackson in February, January, I think, and late December. I don't know, somewhere right around there. And he was like, I have to put weight on. I know that. He was like, I have to. And he's a smaller framed four at the moment. Has the like length and height. Just needs to fill out his frame a little bit, and he knows that. But currently, Jackson McAndrew could absolutely play the three, and he'll be able to play the three throughout his career. He won't be like pigeonholed into playing the four. But yeah, you brought in Jemiah Neal for kind of that athletic wing playmaking, defense, and rebounding that you lost in Baylor Shireman. So I personally right now think the starting lineup would be Ashworth, Isaacs, Neal, Mason Miller, Ryan Kalkbrenner. In some sick, twisted way, I could see the lineup by the end of the year. I don't even know if this is feasible. I could see the lineup by the end of the year being like Isaacs at the point, Larry Johnson at the two, one of the freshmen coming in from California. Um, like Jemiah Neal at the three, Jackson Andrew at the four, Kalkbrenner at the five. I know that sounds, or maybe you go like Andrew at the three, or Neal at the four, Kalkbrenner at the five. I know that sounds absolutely insane because there are two freshmen in that starting lineup right there. But again, it just depends how quick the freshmen develop. Greg McDermott said that they're going to have a chance to have a role early. Like they're not saying like, yeah, you guys are freshmen, like just sit this year out. No, this is one of the best freshman classes. It's only three deep, but it's one of the best freshman classes that Creighton's ever had, led by the best recruit that Creighton has ever landed. And so they're going to have a chance early. What does that do to the starting lineup? We'll find out in February. We'll find out in late January. But there's going to be a lot of versatility to figure out in the non-con. Kind of like I said, same with Nebraska. And so we'll see. I don't know. So what's Nebraska's early season tournament next year? What's their holiday tournament?
They are in Hawaii around Christmas
Okay.
time, and there aren't a lot of notable names in this field. There's Charlotte, you get the Bryce Williams reunion game.
Yep.
Oregon State, Hawaii, obviously. There are a couple more that
Okay.
I'm missing, but they're pretty much all mid-major,
Okay.
which
So
is which checks out in the way that Nebraska built its schedule last year, which worked out
yeah,
well for Nebraska. I think 2 years ago in 2022, they kind of overstepped they were kind of out of their depth. They had a much harder non-conference schedule. It didn't work out. It did work out this past season. They won all of the games they were supposed to, and it put them into a really good position going into conference play. They won all the games they were supposed to, and they had three Power Five opponents in the non-conference, and they won two of them, losing
yeah,
to Creighton, beating Oregon State, who was not very good, and beating Kansas State, who was decent, like a fringe tournament team.
yeah.
So I
No,
think they're
that's
just gonna, by all indications, the games that we see on the schedule right now, I think they're gonna try to follow the same blueprint. Light non-conference schedule, all nothing but winnable games. Try to set yourself up in the best possible position moving forward. The risk of that is obviously you don't have a lot of room for error. One loss
yeah,
to, North Dakota, who they trailed at halftime last season, throws a wrench into the whole idea. But if
yeah,
you take care of business and then you deal with the Big Ten schedule once you get to that part.
yeah. And see why I asked is one, because that'll take us into our next part, but two, that affects that kind of experiment period that we had just talked about. Because it's going to look a lot different for Nebraska than it will for Creighton, a
Yes,
team
it
that will
is.
enter next season with a return trip to Tuscaloosa to
Oh
play
man,
preseason number one
gotta be
question
right.
mark.
Like
Is it them or Kansas? Flip a coin.
it doesn't
Um,
matter because
yeah, and it doesn't matter because they're going to play Kansas in Omaha for the Big 12 Big East Challenge. And yeah, dude, so their non-con's already tough. And then the thing that we've learned since the last time we talked, I thought this was hilarious because Matt Norlander, I believe of CBS, came out and said on May 7th, talking about this like new NIL festival event thing in Las Vegas that's like The big draw, of course, is if you're picked or if you're in it, you get $1 million to go to your NIL collective. Like for showing up, you get $1 million. And then you can win up to an additional $1 million for your NIL collective, by winning the MTE, if you will. And so he reports this, and I quote tweeted it. He says, in talking to my sources, I'm expecting the 8th team for this year's event to come out of the Big East. And I quote tweeted it shortly after, and I said, hey, Creighton won't be the Big East team to get into this because they're headed for battle. They're headed to battle for Atlantis, the exact same dates. I said, but finding a way there in the future would be huge, obviously, because the $1 million is just nuts. And what happened 4 days later, Wilson?
What happened, John?
I wake up to a text asking what is going on with Creighton basketball in terms of a trip to Vegas. And I was like, huh? And so I get on Twitter and see that Matt Norlander has reported that Creighton is withdrawing from Battle for Atlantis and getting into this NIL tournament festival. I think it's the Players Era Festival is what they're calling it. They're making like a week-long thing, all that stuff. So yeah, they, then I kind of confirmed that. So yeah, Creighton's going to be in a field that has, Alabama, ironically enough, Houston, Notre Dame. Houston, that's another, like, Notre Dame, Oregon, Rutgers, San Diego State, Texas A&M.
What?
A rather loaded field. You have 2 of the top 5 teams in the, like, there's going to be like 4 top 25 teams in this 8-team event. Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And yeah, so pretty monumental because playing in Battle for Atlantis is kind of a rite of passage in college basketball. And Creighton said, hey, we view the $1 million guaranteed in NIL as maybe more important for our goals. Because I don't know if at this point Creighton needs the exposure from an event like Battle for Atlantis. Like they've made 3 Sweet 16s in 4 years. They've been doing Elite Eight. They've kind of sat toward the top of the Big East for a decade. So I don't know if they need the exposure from an event like that. Everyone in the country would take an extra $1 million in NIL. And so, it makes sense because now they can enter, each of the next 3 seasons, because apparently Creighton's committed to the event for 3 years. They can enter each of the next 3 seasons saying, hey, we have $1 million in addition to whatever our boosters or our NIL, whatever our regular collective is. We have an additional $1 million because we're just participating in this event. And if you help us win it, you can get a little bit more. Easy sell. You might not be able to get a kid to come to a school just for that. But if he's teetering between, Creighton and, I don't know, Oregon, right? I guess I wouldn't be fair because that's a team in there. But if you're teetering between Creighton and, I don't know, Providence, and Creighton's like, hey, we guaranteed have $1 million every year, it makes the decision a little bit easier, I would assume. So yeah, it's pretty monumental. People think that it'll change the landscape of how people view these early season MTEs. Because again, it's kind of a rite of passage to play in Battle for Atlantis. And Creighton, I don't know if it's I'm assuming people have pulled out of the event before, but it's rare, obviously. And the latest is Creighton. Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, the $1 million in NIL is necessary almost. Like you have to have it. But yeah, it's just interesting because it's an event that we really don't know much about.
It kind of gives me NBA in-season tournament vibes. Maybe it's
Yeah.
just the Las Vegas of it all. But
Yeah.
also the money, because remember people weren't sure, they're like, how much are guys going to be able to really like get up for the in-season
Uh-huh.
tournament? And then it
They said,
started
hey,
at like,
there's money
oh,
involved.
there's money on the line,
Yeah.
and people like money, athletes like money, and
Yeah.
that's plenty of a motivator. So I don't know, it
Yeah.
gives me NBA in-season tournament vibes with
That's good.
Las Vegas and the money, and just kind of how's this gonna go? How's this gonna work?
No, that's good. That's good. And the kind of the real important part is getting the commitment for 3 years because, or being committed for 3 years because um, this is set to expand from 8 to 16 next year, including schools like Kansas and Duke. And so, the $1 million just for showing up is resonating with a lot of big time programs across the country. And so you're just going to have a behemoth of an MTE every Thanksgiving week because all of these teams are not going to turn down again an extra $1 million in NIL. So yeah, man, it'll be nuts. I'm excited to go to Vegas though. So we'll see. We'll see. We've got one last thing to hit on in our Creighton Pact episode, and it's that just announced this week, actually, just announced on Monday, the Championship Center, which is Creighton's men's basketball practice facility, is being renamed to the McDermott Center. A rare move, I think I think is
Yeah,
appropriate.
how common is that to do something like that when the person whose name it is still
Yeah,
active?
that's people usually say, you know, don't build a statue of this person until they're dead, right? Because like a statue is so set in stone and like whatever. Um, and I don't know, maybe the same applies to a building, not when they're dead, essentially. But you typically do not see, yeah, building a facility named after somebody who is actively still coaching at that school. Um, and I do think it's the Creighton announced this on Monday, and they said that for Greg McDermott and family, or like for the McDermott family. And I think that's kind of the interesting thing of all of this is, yes, Greg McDermott is at the forefront and has been, but it's not just about him. Is kind of again the interesting thing
I mean, that's
because in the release they mentioned Doug's impact of when he was here, and they mentioned the rest of the family, Teresa, Greg's wife, who is kind of the inspiration, if you will, or the constant motivator every year for the pink out game. For people who know her story. So yeah, it's just interesting. It's rare. It'll be official on June 20th. They'll kind of do a ceremony outside, renaming it the Championship Center to the McDermott Center.
that is interesting what you say about, the release mentions the whole family, because that's probably another unique situation in that
Yeah,
Creighton's maybe the only program where two of the most impactful figures in program history are from the same family.
yeah, yeah. I couldn't. Can you think of another? Like we're missing. We're missing a big one for sure somewhere.
Yeah. Um,
Um, yeah,
no,
but
I can't
not
can't
like
think of anyone like
I'm.
to the extent of Creighton.
That's what I'm saying. Like the McDermotts, and by the McDermotts in this sense, I'm talking about Greg and Doug. Like they ushered Creighton kind of into what it is now. Like Dana had built it, Dana Altman had built it, had kept it there, and then he leaves for Oregon, and Greg McDermott takes over, and they have they just kind of continue that success. They make tournaments, and overnight they go to the Big East, and it's like, oh my God, what, like the Missouri Valley to the Big East? How is this going to go? And they didn't miss a beat. Doug McDermott, National Player of the Year. Greg McDermott will enter next season 2 wins away from passing Dana Altman as the program's all-time winningest coach. You just don't see that everywhere. So yeah, that'll be the interesting thing. It came about, Wilson, because this summer will mark 10 years since the Championship Center opened. 500 donors contributed to it, over 500 donors. One of them, who had the lead donation, was the Scott family, Ruth and Bill Scott. They're like longtime supporters of Creighton, longtime friends of Greg McDermott. They requested that the facility be named after McDermott. I'm not exactly sure when that was, but at some point, the Scott family requested that building be named after Greg McDermott.
Interesting.
Yeah, so 20th, it'll be official. He'll have so Greg McDermott will go to work every day and walk up the stairs to his office in the building that has his name on it.
How about that?
That's pretty cool, man. So yeah. What's the rest of the summer look like? For Creighton, it is like I said, it's draft stuff really. It's the kids are on campus now. The youngins are on campus. I think the whole team campus. Day 1 was Wednesday. They had workouts and whatnot, and so they arrived. So now it'll just be kind of wait and see what happens with Baylor Shireman and Trey Alexander. Drafts in 3 weeks, and that'll kind of be the summer for Creighton basketball, unless they fill the last scholarship or have rename another building or back out of another contract and schedule something crazy. Yeah, I don't know. That'll be it for Creighton though. It's just kind of draft stuff and watching Baylor and Trey.
Yeah, Nebraska. Nebraska starts a week from today. June 12th is their first summer workout. Just got that. Some off-season things to monitor. Mostly revolves around Keisei Tominaga. He will be in the Olympics, which that's kind of neat. And it's also, I know he's worked out some NBA teams. We'll see where it goes from there. But yeah, other than that, I think it should be a fairly quiet rest of summer for Nebraska.
Yeah. You said you were working on some stuff that come out next week. What are you working on? If you want to tease it, if you want to plug it.
Oh yeah, nothing real fancy. Just had a talked to Fred Hoiberg yesterday. So got a couple stories out of that. Just kind of looking at what this Nebraska team will look like, what they want to look like. How that's all about taking the next step for them. They're coming off the most successful season in years.
Yeah.
And now they're trying to take the next step, and that begins Wednesday. Fred was pretty specific. He said it does not begin the day of the first game. It begins at that first summer workout. It's a different looking team. They got some continuity, but now it's Nebraska's in a real interesting spot as a program, and they don't want to plateau.
Yeah, no, it'll be fun, man. Well, hopefully it's not a month before we hop on here again. I'm assuming we'll do some pre-draft stuff, certainly. And just kind of evaluate where Baylor, Trey, and Keisei all stand ahead of them. And then we'll certainly talk after the draft too. But we'll see if something happens in the meantime, man. Yeah. That's going to do it for this week's episode of Half Court Press. For all of our content, as always, you can go over to omaha.com. That's going to do it for this time. We'll talk to y'all soon. Peace.